Thank you, through Mr. Speaker. Me talk thank you also good la treasurer bla yumi. Me president this la budget bla yumi. Me amamas also this la money plan bla country bla yumi now and me tablim la parliament where me good pla. This pla me one bla big bla budget street. Big bla budget street. Big bla lo revenue. Big bla lo expenditure, big bla lo deficit, big bla lo loan. So okota something and big bla. So me hamama also only passing one bla record budget straight. But Mr. Speaker, lo assumptions na tintin blo budget there. Plan di ol sawe man, oli tokpinis. IMF, World Bank, ADB, OSAID, all plan di all development partners, all sawe man, all big bla accounting firm. Only talk about some global economy. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty over the next 2 or 3 years. Driven by the fact that plan the all birwa is up world where and by affecting some assumptions you mean working lo frame him this budget blue. So government talk about some treasury talk about some economy but continue to grow. With all this uncertainty is really misleading, Mr. Speaker. It is not correct because many economies around the world are saying that they are expecting some form of recession. Meaning some economy we go bagarablik. But lower side you mean talk, but you mean by go strong yet. Our economy will continue to grow. And many central banks around the world are intervening, Mr. Speaker. Intervening because inflation blow global economy will go on top and our own inflation is going up. So central banks are intervening with corrective measures like upping interest rate, blow money, also lending me go low, one bank, low inside low economy blow. To try and curb, stopping this inflation low go on top, low bagrabbing economy blow world. So PNG is no exception, Mr. Speaker. Our country is no exception. The second thing is that the windfall that our government is talking about is derived from only 1 or 2 products that we export in this country, LNG and oil. LNG is affected because, Mr. Speaker, the biggest producer of LNG in the world is Russia, or one of the biggest producers, or one of the biggest suppliers to a big market in Europe. Because now of the Ukraine conflict, we have a situation where online Europe we work in now, no importing plenty gas below Russia, price below LNG go on top, and we are the beneficiaries of that. But how long will that last? We don't know. You and I don't know, Mr. Speaker. Whether the conflict in Ukraine will continue or not, and we will be still the beneficiaries. But I can guarantee you one thing, Mr. Speaker. Prices will readjust, and most likely they will come down. So this assumption of that over the next 4 or 5 years, that prices will stop on top yet now, but you mean by benefit yet here, I'm one but tintin, where we have to be very careful. Very careful, Mr. Speaker. So this is a budget that is framed around these 2 or 3 assumptions. So, Mr. Speaker, normally when we frame budgets, my small experience in this House is that we frame budgets around development plans or vision or programs or strategy. But when the treasurer comes here, time and booking speech plan here, no got one vision. No got one vision. And to talk about budget repair. Budget repair, one something. You've been repairing the budget for the last 3 years, Mr. Speaker. When are you going to stop repairing and be productive? We have to make sure that our development plans are fully costed, fully designed, so that we can fund them properly. We are talking about public money, Mr. Speaker. Public money. And Mr. Speaker, I was some treasurer will blame previous governments, and I take responsibility of what we have done in our government, and many of those who are sitting on the other side were my ministers in my government. But not one of them are men enough to stand up and take responsibility, you know. Our governments are not run by one person. It's run by our parliament. But they continue. And thank you for stepping and intervening on my behalf. Because Treasurer continues to keep on blaming me. He thinks, why are you in business? I've been in business for over 40 years, Mr. Speaker. 40 years when I left university. Mina go na. See one contract with the government. I didn't ask the Prime Minister to write me a check when he was my finance minister. Let me assure you that. I've been in private sector for 40 years. So, you know, you can rebut that. You've been investigating for the last 3 years and you found nothing because I never asked you for nothing, Mr. Speaker. But you saw it. There's a kind of blame game here. There's the kind of blame game here. You take ownership. You've been in government for 3 years. Take ownership.
Honorable Member Ialibu Pangia, you are referring now to statement when we ask him, Treasurer withdraw finish or Emmy withdraw finish or you're not going to bring him back in.
Sorry, me no you good.
You work law now refer long one plus statement where Treasurer make him, now she ask him to withdraw him. Yeah. And we withdraw finish, so you're not going to bring him back in.
Yeah, me also talk. Thank you, Utah Sol. Yeah, that's you working the second intervention. Yeah? So you're not going to worry about the talk.
You can continue long.
But me talk.
Discussion.
Have to talk about budget repair. Yeah. One time, member stop the repairing budget because, Mr. Speaker, this is probably third budget and probably another 2 or 3 supplementary budgets that he has presented, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, he has to take some responsibility of the performance of the economy of our country. Today, when he's talking about budget repair, let me highlight to you, Mr. Speaker. This is 3 years of consecutive high deficits in our budget. 3 years of record consecutive high deficit. Mr. Speaker, also, this year and the last year, and the year before when COVID was in our country, unemployment is at record levels, Mr. Speaker. At record levels. But minimum wages is still at its lowest. There are a lot of families out there who are hurting, Mr. Speaker. But today, as government continues to print money and borrow money from the central bank, the interest rates are going up. That is the fact. The biggest expenditure, now the third biggest expenditure of this budget is repayment to central bank. Because the cost of borrowing money there is much higher than the concessional loans that we get from ADB and all the Exim banks around the country in Australia. That is a fact, Mr. Speaker. You look at the numbers that you print. The third biggest expenditure of this budget is payments to repay treasury bills. So, Mr. Speaker, when you do borrow that kind of money, what happens is that you stop growth in the private sector because banks become lazy, super funds become lazy. They buy treasury bills, they buy treasury bonds, and they don't lend money to private sector. And when they don't lend money to private sector, Mr. Speaker, what happens is that private sector does not grow and does not build a business, unemployment becomes prevalent. That's what we are facing today. And Mr. Speaker, instead of addressing these kind of core issues in the country, the Treasurer is saying, I'm still continuing to budget repair. And Mr. Speaker, let me say this. Today, interest rates in our country remain high. All you have to do, Mr. Speaker, is ring the central bank and they'll tell you what government is borrowing from them. On a short-term loan, 12 months, 24 months, 5-year, 10-year loans that they are getting from the central bank. The government is the biggest borrower. To fund this budget, Mr. Speaker, you will borrow more money from the central bank because nobody else is going to lend you money. And all it does is put pressure in our economy, where private sector, SME, agriculture, all our small businessmen and women cannot borrow money because the banks are lazy. They are not forced to lend money. They are lending money to central bank because they're getting much easier interest rates. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the other reasons is that inflation continues to grow. It remains very high. I think it's about 6% on average now. That's what the budget is estimating, but I think it's literally more than that. Because when you go down to the supermarket, when you go down to the shops, the prices of goods and services is already increasing. Many of us know that our people who has no wage adjustment over the last 3 or 4 years are still paying for the price that is increasing of basic goods, rice, and tin fish, and all something. This is reality, Mr. Speaker. And the Treasurer thinks that by assisting 500 million Kena and reducing wages tax is helping everybody. How many employees are in this country who are going to benefit from that, Mr. Speaker? Probably 150,000 people. Get your numbers, go check it, go to IRC and have a look before you make pronouncements. These are only 150,000. What about the rest of the 9.5 million people in this country? How are they benefiting from this budget when the cost of living is increasing, cost of prices are increasing, Mr. Speaker? So we have that situation where inflation is going up, interest rates are going up, business confidence is very low. So how long are we going to continue to do budget repair? So, Mr. Speaker, when you have a situation now, the Treasurer, who continues to walk in and out, because he's got no care for the country, no care for the country. It comes late. This is the most important budget policy document for the government, When you're serious about running this country, you sit there and listen. You sit there and listen. You have to be serious about your job. Decisions that you make affect 9 to 10 million people in this country.
Honorable Member of Ialibu, you make a point of order. Honorable Prime Minister, one point of order, you.
My point of order, I'd like the former Prime Minister, former Treasurer, and the member for Ialibu Pangia to take a little bit of women out of his inferences to the Treasurer. Treasurer is only a human being. He needs to go to the restroom. He needs to do anything. There is no commandment that affixes him to the chair when he is speaking. So can he be kind on himself and be lighter on the Treasurer? He cannot pass judgment on a fellow member that is lazy or is working hard. He's not got to understand what Treasurer is going through in his life. Can he withdraw his statement on his assessment on Treasurer's work ethics? For me, I find Treasurer amongst the hardest worker in this parliament at the moment. Much harder than him anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. This is his budget. He arrived late in this parliament. Minus our Prime Minister give him leap la monogat. Logo malo liklik logo the time. But I'm all right. Mi pla larem lo tupla. But this is not a this is not a matter that has to be taken lightly. We are talking about a document that is going to affect 10 million people of our country. So I am not going to withdraw any statement whatsoever, because he has to take his job seriously, or he doesn't have to have this job. There are 117 members on this parliament who can do his job if he is not wanting this job.
Honorable,
But anyway, going forward, Mr. Speaker.
Member of Ialibu, time Honorable Prime Minister went in, and we know make him ruling yet, you should have talk. So now by me stop you lig na me make him this la ruling no this la point of order. Point of order law, Honorable Prime Minister, and we got through inside long end. You looking past them, we go maybe in Kirab lig. Na me go outside, there this assistant speaker I accept because me must go straight to me. Now behind me come back. So nongo them treasurer me one kind of same, and me go outside. See now no see two plenty time me saw save him. Time treasurer me walking plenty all talk blongan. Some time you miss a kirap too. Lusim siya go outside na come back, so that's like go come and me that's a but you got point too. Lo make him time you talk all same. Treasurer me late lo come inside long siya lo important bill where me must stop na desla and me got point lo desla, but no good got some reason why and me pass it come, but me sabe desla me important bill and must stop, but me asking you now lo kisima plus blue na you can continue lo discussion blue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By me na pulim totok lo desla na mi pinisim totok lo milo walk passing blow treasurer blow you me. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker, when we are repairing the budget, business confidence in this country is at the lowest in the history of our country for 47 years. Because why? Government work law not firm on its decisions. Time you working on the decision, stand on it. Whether it's right or wrong, you have already made a decision. People must know that that's the decision. But changing totoki go come, changing policy go come, affects confidence of people. And business are the biggest employers of our people in this country. Government is not. Mibla lo pani money na spending money tasole. Those who make money for this country are in the business community and the employment community. So we must be consistent about our decision. And Mr. Speaker, the Treasurer talks about GDP. Yes, when we took over government in 2011 and when we finished in 2019, we doubled the GDP. But GDP does not feed our people, Mr. Speaker. GDP is just a measurement of the performance of our economy. It does not feed our people. You cannot say that, oh, people GDP will grow up, but real challenges in the economy remain. Let me say this. Why is the GDP increasing in our country today and over the last 3 years? It's only because LNG prices and oil prices are up. So we are earning more revenue in this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, why are the LNG prices up? Only because of the conflict in Ukraine and Russia is not able to meet the LNG market. That's the only reason why. But it will come down. And we are not planning for that readjustment in this budget, Mr. Speaker. We are spending the windfall that we have today because mibla tinggal sem desla price bla LNG bestabiet but mibla will be rich forever. We are spending before we have earned the money, Mr. Speaker. Who are the biggest beneficiaries of the increase in GDP? It is certainly not our people. It's certainly not our country. It is certainly the big oil companies that are producing LNG in this country. They are the biggest beneficiaries. But, we proclaim that, that's our Mipla Woklo Mr. Totok where Miblatino some GDP work lo grona, Mibla work lo benefit lo this law. So Mr. Speaker, so when we are addressing revenue in this country, this is one of revenue. And I was part of a previous government before our government get into office in 2012, where we had high commodity prices. And we made mistakes. We had surplus almost 6 billion kina in trust funds. And yet we built not one single road, not one single hospital, the trust funds were gone, 6 billion kina. And I was part of that government, and I am saying that we were irresponsible. We must not make the same mistakes again. These windfalls comes once in a lifetime. When the commodity prices...
Member of Ialibu Pangia, time blue you and me, it finished now. Me come long now, Mel, horrible governor long.
20 minutes on this debate, Mr. Speaker. It's 20 minutes on this debate.
Yes.
Why are you stopping me halfway? I have not finished.
Sorry, honorable member of Ialibu, 20 minutes blue and finish. I'm clock is stable high blue me, I go finish.
No, God, I think you must read Narbla clock.
You must.
Clock blue me, talk blue me finish.
Clock blue me, and me talk all same 20 minutes, so because I clock blue me, you must be him. And time blue and finish now.
I think, good luck to talk, so I'm all right. You sit down. Good luck.
Thank you.